Let us move on to the next presenter. He finished his Bachelor of Arts degree in English Language Studies at the University of San Carlos in Cebu City. He is currently finishing his Master of Arts degree in Applied Linguistics in the same university. At present, he is an instructor at the Department of Communications, Linguistics, and Literature, and also a research assistant at the Cebuano Studies Center. He also serves as the lecture series organizer for the center's monthly Vicente Soto Lecture Series. A round of applause for Mr. Jose Antonio C. Dasig Jr.
So, good afternoon everyone. So, mo-present di ay ko no. Awin ako change ako sa inyong mga PowerPoint. But anyway, so good afternoon everyone. It's an honor to be presenting in front of you here today. Once again, I'm Jose Antonio Dasig. I'm a linguist at heart, but the topic of my presentation this afternoon has nothing to do with linguistics, okay? In fact, I'm going to talk about a certain medicinal plant, more specifically, how we can make an alternative medicine for coughs and other symptoms of colds like stuffy nose, sore throat, etc., using this particular plant. So, does anyone know what plant is here? It was already mentioned earlier. Or if you looked at the abstract, the list of abstracts, you may have already have an idea. It's Lagundi. So, does anyone have any experiences using Lagundi as an alternative medicine? Oh, Miss Cabales, you have? Okay. Anyone else? Oh, we have Miss Marie Chris as well. So, yes, it is Lagundi. Next slide, please. And the topic of my presentation this afternoon will revolve around showing you a teaching module about making a Lagundi decoction that can be used as, again, an alternative to what you can generally get from a pharmacy. Hence my title, Backyard Remedy, a teaching module on Lagundi as alternative medicine for coughs and colds. Backyard yun, no? Kind of crude, pero I actually conceptualized the title because of my reminiscence back when I was still living in Manila. Like we had an expansive backyard there where my mom would plant lagundis. Pero at the time, I didn't know they were lagundis because when you're 10 years old, the only thing you're worried about is your games and not getting scolded at by your mom. So I didn't know they were lagundis, and I didn't know yet their importance. So I guess me naming this module Backyard Remedy is sort of a tribute to those neglected lagundis. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Given how commercialized the efficacy of Lagundi in treating coughs has become, it's no surprise that many people are already aware, as shown earlier, of its benefits. In fact, a lot of pharmaceutical companies have already made different products containing Lagundi, mostly in the forms of syrups, again, to treat coughs. Right? So, I'm sure nakakita na mo sa mga commercials, sa mga Lagundi syrup, as mentioned by Ms. Gavales earlier, kanang dahon-dahon na daw, kanang yung giubo siya no, niya, murag OA na kaayo, niya pag inom niya syrup, okay na siya. So, next slide, please. The one I showed you earlier, those drugs or what Garnier et al. Calls as pharmaceuticals, refers to substances that are specifically formulated in the treatment or prevention of disease and for restoring, correcting, or modifying organic function. So simply put, these substances are specifically designed to treat, prevent, or alleviate symptoms of particular ailment of the body. So in the context of our discussion, it's the alleviation of mostly respiratory ailments such as coughs, sore throat. And we can say that gone are the days, because of these pharmaceuticals, gone are the days when people were hard pressed to find effective and accessible medicine at a moment's notice, right? For the most common malady. However, this does not imply the inventions of these pharmaceuticals does not imply that producing cures out of traditional medicinal herbs such as Lagundi has gone out of practice, nor does it take away from its efficacy. In fact, we can even argue in favor of the sustainability of using such herbal medicines. Remember my story earlier? They literally grow out of your backyard, right? Even without your consent sometimes. I'm kidding. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's common enough. These shrubs are common enough, and we can maybe save ourselves the trip to the drugstore and just make our own remedy. So, next slide, please. So, for the objectives of this module, at the end of the lesson, the students should be able to understand the significance of using natural plants, specifically Lagundi, to serve as a substitute for pharmaceuticals or commercial medicines in alleviating the symptoms of coughs and other respiratory ailments. And to know the medicinal properties of Vitex negundo, or the scientific name for Lagundi, given that it is the basis for clinically proven medicinal formulas sold in the form of tablets and syrups, as what you have seen earlier. And to apply what they have learned when making a Lagundi syrups themselves, after having familiarized with the process and the steps involved. So, next slide, please. Now, before we go into how the lesson or how the teaching module will be conducted, let's briefly go over the medicinal properties of Lagundi, as reflected in local literature. So in the Philippines, Lagundi is also called the five-leaf or the Chinese chaste tree, and can be considered as one of the most researched and well-studied natural remedies. In fact, the Department of Health, as was shown earlier in the earlier presentations, highly recommends it as one of the top 10 medicinal plants due to its anti-inflammatory and anti-tussive properties. Anti-tussive meaning it acts as a cough suppressant. That's according to Bautista, Cubos, and Lim. So its anti-inflammatory and anti-asthmatic properties helps facilitate the expulsion or the removal of phlegm from the body. So it is commonly used as, again, a treatment for cough, sore throat. It can be an anti-allergy and other similar respiratory problems. This is due mostly because of the substance, or it contains the substance chrysophenol D, which is effective against cough and asthma, in particular due to its antihistaminergic, or it meaning it has antihistamine properties, which suppresses allergies. And it can also act as a muscle relaxant. So next slide, please. And then aside from its uses for respiratory ailments, Boy et al. Also listed other ailments that Lagundi can help with, such as rheumatism, boils, diarrhea, and dyspepsia indigestion, as other conditions that can be cured by Lagundi. Atienza et al. Also added that Lagundi components have antioxidant properties, anti-ulcer, antibacterial, antifungal, analgesic, hepatoprotective, meaning it prevents damage to the liver. It has free radical scavenging, among other pharmacological properties. So next slide, please. Now, let's go back to the module. So now that we've established that Lagundi does have medicinal benefits, especially in terms of treating ailments like coughs and sore throats, let's take a look at what we will be needing in order to improve, in order to prepare, for this teaching module and for us to achieve the objectives we've laid out earlier. So first is for the subject matter and materials. In order to introduce to the students the topic of medicinal properties of a Lagundi, a lecture will first be provided using the subsequent materials in the next slide. So the lecture will mostly be similar to the medicinal properties I shown you earlier, but more expansive. But we won't really focus on that because the teaching module is focused on the process of making the Lagundi. The purpose of the lecture is mostly to introduce to the students if they aren't aware, especially the newer generations, right? You're not really into medicinal plants or medicinal substances, plant medicinal substances. So yeah, this serves as an introduction. Next slide, please. Now, after having introduced the topic to the students using that PowerPoint, a video demonstration will be prepared on the actual process of making Lagundi. So as a teacher, your demonstration should include the following materials. You will need cups, funnels, of course, the Lagundi leaves, which will need to be chopped, water, brown sugar, a portable butane stove, but it can be any as long as you can boil the water, a strainer, and you can put labels if you want. Now, next slide, please. So as for the procedure, for at the start of the class, for the anticipatory or the motivation part, after having introduced the topic to the students, the class can then proceed with a discussion with what they know about natural remedies as a sort of icebreaker. So for here, we can show pictures of other medicinal remedies as was discussed earlier, such as calamansi with honey, salabat or ginger tea, and garlic. So this can get the students invested in topic and they can also relate prior knowledge or what they may already know to the current discussion. Next. So for the body, for the actual, first is having introduced that, again we will have the students will have a short lecture on Lagundi as an alternative to pharmaceutical medicine using the sources I showed earlier. And then during the discussion or after the discussion, the teacher may ask the students guide questions to assess their understanding, which is shown in the next slide. So these are just some sample open-ended questions that can verify and engage the students with the material. Next slide, please. So once the lecture is accomplished, the teacher will then ask the students if, of course, they have any questions or clarifications. Then after addressing the questions, if any, the class is then ready for the video presentation. And it will be projected by the teacher. And for the purpose of this presentation, I will show you a sample I made, my sample cooking show. So, Giselle, please. Through the process of making a Lagundi syrup as an alternative for your everyday cough syrup. So, what you're going to need is, firstly, of course, you're going to need your Lagundi leaves. So, at least one bowl would be enough. One bowl's worth of Lagundi, as you can see here, freshly picked with the stems removed and the other undesirable parts removed. And then you're also going to need a measuring cup by which you can measure your Lagundi portions and all that. And then, of course, you would need extra bowls for when you actually finish chopping and then incorporating the other ingredients. And then, to make the Lagundi a bit easier to go down, a bit easier to swallow, you're going to need half a cup of sugar. And then, most importantly, to make the syrup, in order to boil it, you're going to need to have your pots. You're going to need to have your gas range ready, available, and of course, the strainer. All right? So let's try to look at each individual steps. Let's try to walk through the process, as I've mentioned. So first, you're going to cut the Lagundi one by one. Make sure it's nice and cut into chunks so you can easily measure it in your cups. After you After you're done chopping the lagundi, after you're done mincing them, you then put it in your cup. So here, I'll show you, this is already half cup's worth of lagundi. Okay, so for this video, you're going to need 2 cups of this. So 2 cups of this is equal to 1 measurement. So now we have 1 cup's worth of lagundi. The next step is to boil this in 2 cups of water. So make sure to boil it for 30 minutes. See? Okay, so once 30 minutes are up, our lagundi is now properly boiled. So what we are going to do next is we need to strain it to segregate the leaves from the Alright, so be careful in this step. Don't want to burn yourself. Let me get those in, and there we go. So once the lagundi is properly strained, the next step is to add the sugar to make it easier to go down, because naturally we know that lagundi is quite bitter. No? So what we are going to do is we are going to put the lagundi back in our pot. Place our lagundi back in the pot. And then remember we used 1 cup of lagundi, right? So we need to place half a cup of sugar, right? So place that in, and remember to stir the mixture, right? Let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes until the texture is quite syrupy, right? So leave it for a while and occasionally stir the mixture. All right, so once 15 minutes are up, our lagundi syrup is now ready. But before anything, remember to prepare your glass container. Very important. Make sure it's sterilized. And make sure you have a funnel ready, so you can transfer the lagundi with ease. All right, so again, careful with this step so you don't burn yourself. Transfer to the glass container. Right, so transfer the lagundi to the glass container for it to cool down. Right? There. Okay, so after that, you wait for it to cool down. And once it's cooled down, remember to refrigerate the lagundi. Refrigerate it, seal it tightly first, put it in the refrigerator to extend its shelf life. Usually, the lagundi or 1 lagundi decoction will last you 30 days. So make sure to consume it as soon as possible. But if you're if you're planning to store it for a long time, remember that with refrigeration, the shelf life will only reach up to 30 days. So please be sure to consume it before then. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you make a Lagundi decoction. So I hope this tutorial, this short module will help save you a trip to the drugstore and help sort of raise awareness as to the effectiveness of phytomedicine. So, mao na to guys, no? Just from the way I was handling the knife, makaingon na jud mo, di ko kamao magluto. So anyway, can I have my slide? So anyway, after showing that video to the students, after you show your demonstration, the teacher will now instruct the students to prepare for their own decoction making activity, Lagundi decoction making activity. So this will be done individually. A printed step-by-step instruction on the process of making the decoction will also be provided. So once the preparations are done, the activity will begin, and the teacher is expected to move around and inspect each work. So once the students have finished making, next slide, please. So once the students have finished making their own mixture, the teacher will now go over the outputs and provide feedback. Specifically, next slide. Well, there we go. So the teacher will provide marks based on the following rubric, which was constructed using Mertler's guidelines. And then next, please. As a closure or closing activity, the teacher can then proceed to ask the students for their insights from the lecture and the activities done. So all of the students in the class are expected to do a roundtable discussion. This can serve as a bridge to future lessons relevant to the use of medicinal plants and their advantages. So it can also help the students refresh themselves on what transpired and what they've learned during the entirety of the lesson. Next slide. So to end, to conclude this discussion, we reflect on knowing and understanding the relevance of medicinal plants such as Lagundi. So this module sort of underscores the significance of natural remedies in our lives, especially in times when sustainable and accessible medicine is becoming paramount. Prices of the commodities are rising. COVID-19 is still looming over us, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So the insights and skills gained here extend beyond the classroom. It equips the students with relevant knowledge to make informed choices, especially those concerning health and wellness. And hopefully, it will inspire further explorations in the vast field of herbal medicine. Not only that, I also hope that this module can also be a reminder, sort of reminder to the invaluable resources nature offers us every day. So with that, thank you. I end my presentation. Thank you very much. Oh.
Thank you very much for that informative talk and for hosting your own cooking show, Mr. Dasig. Indeed, being able to grow our own backyard remedy would save us the trip to the doctor or the drugstore, considering that substitutes like using Lagundi is a common treatment for cough, sore throat, and other respiratory problems. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Dasig.